know who I am.
When we are finished with you, you'll no longer be yourself.
I remember. I remember everything.
Remembering everything doesn't mean you know everything.
Tell me.
Welcome to the next reel on the RashPixel.fm podcast network. This is the Film Board, a monthly gathering of theater thugs promising to completely spoil a movie just released in theaters, along with a great many other movies that could possibly be related to it. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to spoil Jason Bourne, the number 5. Let's bring our assets back in. Welcome to The Identity, Pete Wright.
I'm going to keep my Film Board script to 25 lines or less.
Say hello to the Supremacy, Steve Sarmento.
That's right, I'm a supreme taco.
As a result of an ultimatum, we welcome back Tommy Hansen.
I keep my secret files in a folder named Secret Files.
And maintaining our legacy, as always, hello, Andy Nelson.
But hello.
So glad to be here with you guys. It may require that we forcefully beat the amnesia out of each other, but I think we'll have a lot to talk about on this one, and we're all chomping at the bit to get going. So let's jump right in with initial thoughts. Pete, go to it!
I'm still laughing about Secret Files, because that's what makes this movie so dumb.
I'm like the CIA. I put them all in a folder that say, don't look.
And then connect it to the internet.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Oh, this movie was so bad it made me hate myself. It was just terrible. My initial thoughts is a page and a half long, so I'm going to restrain myself to just the high level bullet points. The script, people don't talk like this, like they do in this movie. The technology was unforgivingly absurd. The camera, I really look back fondly to the days when the jiggly monkey only pissed in my lemonade instead of completely violating it like it did in this film. The Jason Bourne story, I think overall, guys, I think it was told, it was finished, it was done, and this movie is not a Jason Bourne movie. It's a ridiculous deep dream Facebook CIA story, and they had a couple of huge sins. First, they made Jason Bourne, a fantastic character, boring, but more than that, they made him dramatically inconsequential, and that is unforgivable. I'm done.
Woo. Wow.
Well, we want to start it off with a bang. That's good. Well, and now I think we want to talk a little bit back from the ledge, right, Andy?
I loved it.
Or counterbalance.
No, I didn't love it, actually. But after that, what else do you say? No, I mean, it had issues. I had a lot of problems with this. I didn't have a problem watching it. I found it just easy to kind of digest and make my way through. It didn't infuriate me during the watching. I did get a little infuriated afterward, but you know, it was easy enough to watch. I think, if anything, it's more disappointing for me because I felt, like Pete, I did feel like they didn't need to tell another story. They had kind of completed it. I mean, Matt Damon himself had said, you know, we are done after Ultimatum, and here they are coming back. And it just, it didn't, I was really hoping that the fact that they were coming back meant that there was a really good reason, and this just, it wasn't it. So more than angry, I'm just a little more disappointed.
Okay, so not the counterbalance that I thought was going to be there, but how about you, Steve?
When the Bourne Ultimatum movie ended, because I watched that to sort of just pick up the momentum. It's been 9 years. We had the Bourne Legacy, which was tangentially related. That film, Bourne Ultimatum, ended exactly as the franchise started, with a body of Jason Bourne floating in the water. His whole arc had been completed at the end of that film. So for this, the big challenge was to create a new story arc to engage audiences in a new adventure. But instead, we got another Bourne film that has some entertaining action sequences, but doesn't really progress characters or story significantly. And it just was really a typical action hero franchise film. And for that, I'd rather watch the upcoming Jack Reacher film.
Sure. Which is going to be on a Film Board episode later this year.
That trailer looks really good.
For that and many more
Should we
reasons,
just start talking
I'd
about
rather watch Jack Reacher.
We could spend the next hour talking about the Jack Reacher trailer. How about you, Tommy? What did you think?
I'll be a little bit more mitigating, surprisingly. I thought the plot was paper thin. There's no character development or levity, but it still gave me enough of what I want from a Bourne film just to sort of sate me. It's a bunch of running around, outsmarting jerks in suits, and just fantastic action scenes. Sometimes I go back and forth on how Greengrass films things. This time I was thrilled with how he did it. I enjoyed the experience.
I think it's good that there is a mitigating voice there. I didn't know what to think of this movie. I was confused the entire time trying to figure out for me why I see a Jason Bourne movie. I went back and watched all 4 leading up to this, and honestly, trying to think back, they all kind of bled together. When I think about what different happened between the Supremacy and the Ultimatum, it was difficult for me to figure out. Legacy, of course, is a stand-aside sort of thing, and all that, and because of the whole Jeremy Renner piece, and it's a different story altogether. But this one is different as well. I agree with everyone in terms of the story in that they left it behind and they tried to do something different. It feels like what they thought I wanted to see about Jason Bourne is not what I thought I wanted to see about it. The cool stuff that you're talking about, Tommy, I saw that too, and that's why when I was watching, I still saw a bunch of fights. I still saw a bunch of exotic locations with interesting shots and interesting things, interesting set pieces, but the story was so wrong and flat and weird that I didn't know what I was going to say today. So I'm really happy to hear all the different sort of fuel on the fire in both directions. And I think that the thing that I would go into is that the storyline that comes up on IMDb about this. That's my biggest question. Is it's the shortest one I've ever seen when they say Jason Bourne, now remembering who he truly is, tries to uncover hidden truths about his past. Did he do that?
Yes, because every movie he's there's something that's like, it's like this poor guy. It's every time he encounters some ex-CIA person, he's got these horrible memories that have been buried for a decade that suddenly just appear for no reason and then plague him for a good 24 hours. And then, he's resolved the issue and moves on to mysteriously disappear again.
Jason, we've got terrible news about your college roommate.
Exactly.
You have to come in from the cold.
Yeah, and the thing that I'm pointing out that I kind of want to get your guys' feeling about is that I feel like they thought we saw the movie to see more about Jason Bourne. Because what they focused on here is that they thought they would bring us all back saying, hey, you have more to learn about your past. When those things that you were talking about, Tommy, those fight scenes and sort of the innovative things that were about the action in the early movies were still kind of present, not as well done as before. But what they tried to do different, or what they tried to hook us with, was Jason Bourne. And it wasn't that interesting, and I totally didn't care.
This is the thing right here, JJ. The pinnacle of this entire series for me. The entire series is in the first movie when he's sitting in that mountain lodge and he says, I know that I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking. Now, why would I know that, right? That's it. And that is the incredible challenge that the Bourne Identity as a series kickoff sets up. And the same thing holds true with the books, although they have largely been taken up by better writers than attempted to do the same here. Once you answer the question who Bourne is, the story is over, and we have to come up with a precedent that is much more interesting in order to keep us coming back, or else we want to see new characters. We want to see, maybe it's Matt Damon playing a protector of the Great Wall of China. I don't know. The jury's out on that too, but it wasn't this movie. This movie fails that because by this time, we don't care who your dad was, right? That ended up being an inconsequential piece of an inconsequential story about a guy who was hardly in this movie. I mean, we may have seen him on screen, but he was hardly in it.
Totally. And did any of you care? I mean, about his dad? Was there a piece of this story that gave it any sort of legs?
Not really. I mean, maybe if the element of his father had been more prevalent in the previous films, like, we learned more about his dad's involvement in the government. And I don't know. I just feel like there was something that could have been there that actually would have lent a little more interest in this particular story. It really felt like they were just trying to come up with another shadowy element of Bourne's past. I mean, they were really just trying to recreate kind of the whole premise of each of the other films. You know, there's a dark memory he can't quite latch onto, and then he has to go on a journey to figure out what that is, so that he can kind of move through that. And in this particular case, it was just really inconsequential. It didn't matter. And also, I don't know. I had issues with the fact that the guy who kills his dad is like his age, and you know, it just, I don't know, it just seemed weirdly like
impossible.
Yeah, it's like, how is he only, like, he's still fighting Jason Bourne, but you know, he was like killing Jason Bourne's dad when Jason Bourne was younger. I don't know, that seemed.
And then he was robbing all those casinos in the meantime. That guy's busy.
Busy doing bad things.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, they tried to, you know, with the story with his dad, they tried to connect it to what was his reason for getting into the whole Treadstone project, which I think is, if you're going to go back and try to delve into that mystery again, which Ultimatum really, you know, as I said, wrapped all that up, and you need to pull a thread out of that. Yeah, getting into what would make a soldier commit to, you know, making this decision to enter into this, you know, really, you know, secret, shadowy Black Ops program. What was his objective or goal? And they barely touched on that, because it was, he was doing it because he wanted to get the guys that killed his father. And that got buried so far. And when he said that, I thought, okay, why am I just finding this out near the end when that should have been something driving us towards the beginning? There was a lot of manipulation of the plot, with like Nikki showing up again to try to get him in, and it just really was clunky and awkward writing. But I thought there was a nice seed there that just really wasn't developed enough to get that connected back to what the other Bourne films did, which was, there's a motive for him to try to get this information, to try to find out who he is, and they, I think, ultimately just failed horribly in this one.
I have to ask this question, though. This is the Raiders of the Lost Ark paradox. If Nikki had not shown up, right? If she had if she had not, would this story have happened? Would this Jason Bourne story have happened? It seems to me that Jason himself was perfectly happy in his box to the death lifestyle in Greece. Yes. That there was no story until she brought the, thank God it's encrypted USB drive because it's labeled encrypted, and introduced this story.
It's a generic encrypted drive. What is that? It's encrypted.
They sell it that way at the spy store.
USB port? That'd be great.
I got this USB drive. How do I encrypt it? Here's a label maker. That's what you do. You just label it so. So really, I mean, this story would not have happened. Jason Bourne was not doing this anymore, right? We have no reason to believe he would have picked up the mantle. And that's a major flaw in this story.
They did try, though, to give us a lot of quiet scenes of him in hotel rooms looking sad.
Sort of mirror.
That's not motivation.
No, but I mean, they at least addressed it.
Well, no, but they did try to play up this whole, you know, when Nikki's like, you know, he's like, I don't care. And she's like, no, because you're a patriot and you do the right thing. And so they're ramping up some new Black Ops program that's even worse than anything before. So it's, you know, suddenly it's his burden to take on this mission, because she feels he's a good guy, so he's going to want to set things right. And to me, that was just, you know, it was the writing just trying to, how can we push him towards that? And Pete, to your point, exactly, there was nothing internal for him. He got pushed into a place where he now had to deal with this situation, but there was nothing of his own, you know, character that was driving him to this.
Well, and the problem with that is that if that's the case, if that's the stakes that they're setting up, they're literally trying to convince us that everything we learned about David Webb / Jason Bourne in the first 3 movies, he didn't actually learn. And that, so that they can set up this new plot. And in general, if that's the stakes, that's thin. And the other thing is, if you're setting up the stakes to be about revenge, if you want your protagonist's revenge to be the central motivator of the story, that's pretty difficult for the audience to go along with as well. that's not his character either. That's contrary as well. So there's just all these things that just kind of lose it in the story, and it didn't work.
Well, I think the other piece about this is sort of where we are as a society and where we were when the first 3 Bourne movies came out in the early 2000s, and what I think you've got going on there, why people may have really connected with that, is you've got a soldier returning from war, type of thing, who has been, sort of metaphorically transformed into a new person and now comes back to, America and can't find his place because he's now somebody different. And I think that was something when, at that time was something that people could really identify with a lot of soldiers coming back from overseas and trying to fit in and sort of having this dual life and trying to figure out who they are again. I think that dynamic connected with a lot of people with where our country was at that time. Now they tried to make this, fit in with, contemporary issues by trying to shoehorn this whole like deep dream, privacy, the CIA spying on everybody thing that just, didn't connect. We've got that subplot going on combined with the, the Bourne, revenge plot. And those two things just didn't really weave themselves together in a coherent way. We had 2 different stories going on that I felt just were both really clunky.
That's if 1.7 billion monthly active Facebook users tells us anything, it's that the general populace does not care about the CIA relationship with social media. And they tried to make that a major force of this film, and that was a problem.
It's like they think it's an issue because people talk about it being an issue. But people live with the issue, so it's not an actual thing.
Yeah, maybe, and let me clarify that, because I think that's true. There's this whole thing between the difference between feeling a thing and thinking a thing and knowing a thing as a fact. They're differences, but if we feel it strong enough, maybe it becomes a fact, right? This is our lesson from the Republican convention, according to John Oliver. If you haven't watched it, it's fantastic. But the real issue I think here is that they had to be so overt in the technology discussion that having this between the leader of Deep Dream Facebook and the leader of the CIA was just nonsensical. It was but this is not a Bourne story.
You're right, and the exposition and all of the technology had a lot of trouble. It was so blatantly clear. It was so like, we need everyone to understand. So like actual computer files end with linked to J. Bourne. Like that's not how any computer files work. As we know from like Mr. Robot, like it's weird to have this film exist in a post Mr. Robot world where like computers don't light up and go beep, beep, boop, beep, boop when they're finding new information. And they also can't predict where motorcycles are going to go. But I'll put that to the side. That being said, though, I don't think that people really... I like some of the idea behind it because I think smarty pantses and well-read people know how much Facebook is taking away, how much of our privacy we're giving away willingly to social media. I don't think the majority of people really understand that, though.
But this movie didn't help them understand that.
No.
Do you think people are going to walk away from this movie going, oh, I really should stop doing things on Facebook?
God, I need to go fix my Facebook privacy settings. Thank God for this movie.
No, you would just look around for all the cameras that are constantly on you, apparently. Yeah, okay, fair enough. That's a good point. But I like that it brought up the point. You're right, though, starting with Steve, it did use it in a weird, ham-handed... There were a couple good ideas within this. The idea of you can't exist without being a part of us, so come back into the fold, come out of the cold. The amount of times people are saying this isn't revenge, and it clearly was. There were some things going on, but none of them were followed up on. I completely agree.
This is you actually made my point, Tommy, because we live in an era where Mr. Robot is a thing, and Mr. Robot is notoriously good at showing us the implications of our lives with technology, and it does so in a way that's fantastically dramatized and still authentic. And this movie violates so many core tenets of technology. They make it such a fantastical thing. Have I talked about Gelman amnesia on this show before?
I don't think so.
Gell-Man, Murray Gell-Man was a physicist, and he came up with this concept around amnesia, a kind of amnesia in the media, where like you'll open up a newspaper and you'll read a story that is in your field. Like for you guys, like Tommy will get in and he'll read a story about the LA and the film
Being
industry.
Good with chicks,
right? Exactly, right. The film industry, as I said, and it's all factually wrong. Like it's ridiculous, and Tommy knows that it's ridiculous because he's invested in the community. He's a professional in the field, and he knows that this is wrong. This is factually in error. But then turns the page and reads something in about international relations and says, "Oh, wow, that's really amazing that this thing must be true." You forget that
right, trusting too much.
Yeah, right. Because
the source,
because if this international relations thing, why is it right when the thing that you knew on the page before was so very wrong? Well. This film, because they got the technology in the beginning so very wrong, so wildly wrong, and put it in such a fantastical universe of fake technology, that it makes it really difficult to take anything else they say in this film around our technological culture
and then they take
seriously at all.
That's a really
Exactly.
good point.
They fail. So that's the point I was trying to make.
And it extends to the rest of the story, too. I mean, that's something that I think we were willing to forgive in the initial Bourne movies because we just didn't know. It wasn't the amnesia concept that you're talking about is totally applicable to this movie because they're doing things wrong. But the world of identity and supremacy and to some point even legacy and ultimatum is foreign to so many people that they were willing to buy into the spy aspect of the CIA there.
Yeah, that's a great connection.
Which I think that the idea that there is always going to be in the next Bourne movie another person higher up in the chain that he can somehow connect his memories to. This time it's Tommy Lee Jones, who also had some direct piece of Treadstone that he needed to go to him and end the circle there. So the next CIA bad guy connected to the next female CIA person who will help Bourne is going to be in Jason Bourne, David Webb, Knockdown Part 7.
Well, here's the thing: is Nikki tells him, "Oh, they're doing it again, and it's even worse than Treadstone." And Treadstone and Blackbriar were all about like these brainwashed secret agents. Iron Fist is just about, we're getting into people's computers. They're not even related topics. It's not like, they're starting up the program again, which is what she made it sound like. It's completely different topic. I don't even know if Tommy Lee Jones's character even had any knowledge or involvement in Treadstone or Blackbriar because he seems to be in a completely different field, or maybe as a supervisor he was aware of it, but he wasn't directly involved as the other directors were in the prior films. This is just, again, where we try to pull Jason Bourne in by saying, the CIA's doing bad things again, but it didn't connect to him personally.
And they went out of their way to demonstrate his ineptitude in technology in a specific sequence with Alicia Vikander. It was ridiculous.
Oh, yes. All I have to say is, Tony Gilroy, why have you forsaken us?
Well, that's what I should have known. I felt like that if Tony Gilroy and his brother Dan had been involved in this, that it would have been much smarter and much better. And the fact that they're not, I think, said a lot. And the fact that Paul Greengrass opted to write this with his editor, Christopher Rouse, I think kind of was just a strange choice. I mean,
the director and the editor wrote it.
Yeah, Paul wrote it with his editor, who's been working with him since at least Bourne Supremacy. So
then there's no one else to talk to. Oh, that seems really dangerous.
Yeah,
it's a strange
the epitome
choice
of not enough eyes to tell you if things are going wrong. The person that starts it and the person that ends it. Yikes!
I think it's also strange, as a side note, that what Tony Gilroy has instead gone on to work on is The Great Wall.
See,
goodness.
So who knows? Maybe there will be more to that film now then
I think
was
the CIA
expecting.
is behind all of this.
Well, and I think it's good to bring up Gilroy here because I think that this movie highlights actually how smart potentially Legacy really was. Because you talk about Iron Hand and how they're trying to reference the fact that they're doing the same. Steve, you said that they're doing the same thing all over again. Well, at least Legacy was that. It was a variation on the theme, and potentially, if they really wanted to go the Jeremy Renner, Aaron Cross direction, they could have pushed that further. And that was Tony Gilroy. But, Legacy wasn't 100% great either. There were problems there, but it had a creative leap that was on the same theme. This is just a complete miss target, it feels like, in terms of the Bourne franchise.
It felt like they could have come up with something interesting by actually involving or by tying this somehow to Legacy and actually kind of building more into the world. And that's kind of what I was hoping that they would be doing is finding a way to involve us in all these other operatives who might be out there and kind of create a bigger world for Jason. And they just, they pulled what so often happens. They pretended the last film didn't happen. It seemed.
Right. And you have to wonder if any of that has to do with politics, right? Because of how everything happened with everyone involved. So when you think about Paul Greengrass, and obviously now we've talked about how much his hand was on this movie, what did he do well? What did he leave behind?
Okay, the whole thing in Athens, that whole rioting scene, I thought that's his strength, is those large scale, mass crowd riot action scenes, and maybe it was because there was such clunky dialogue between Matt Damon and Julia Stiles that looked better. But there was just the way, as they're going through the crowd, tracking that, and you've got all this chaos going on around them, that I was like, oh, okay, we're here. These are the things that I remember enjoying about Bourne Supremacy and Bourne Ultimatum. We've got this sort of large-scale chase scene going on, and then we've got the car chase in Vegas, and those felt, I got sucked into those, and to me, that's where he works well. That and the hand-to-hand combat, the shaky cam didn't bother me this time. I was all in it, but for me, it was that we're in the middle of the police and the protesters in Greece, and that just to me worked really well. I was really enjoying that sequence.
I agree completely. I mean, that's where, again, when I'm leaning a little bit more positive is because whenever those things started, and really so much of the plot was just like, we have to talk for a little bit. And then look, a foot chase. Like that was sort of the way that the film was made or written or conceived. That stuff was still really on point. And I love that. And I'm glad that you brought up, as I had barely glanced on, the shaky cam stuff really had more of a sense of place for me than some of his other movies have in the past. It didn't bother me at all.
Oh my gosh, you guys are killing me.
Are you guys talking about it during the fight scenes, or because when he used the shaky cam to look at his cell phone or to look at a computer screen and the camera couldn't catch a frame?
Oh. Yes, it was out of focus. And if you go back and watch the shaky cam fight scene in the apartment in the first movie, and you watch the shaky cam fight scene in the apartment, the tragedy of shaky cam fight scene in the apartment, they might as well have just turned it on to snow on the screen, because you couldn't see anything by comparison, right? The first movie, it was remarkably in place, to your vernacular, Steve. I was able to connect with that very much. It was very intimate, but it was fast, and yet I could keep up with what was going on. And I mean, he very well in that film set the stage and changed a lot of movies to come after it by employing this technique and doing it so well in that movie. And it has just gone completely downhill. It was off the rails in this movie. I would love to hear comments on that. I just clearly we saw a different cut of the film maybe, but the thing that I agree with you with the just back to the Greece riot thing. I agree with you. He does have a real knack for putting a presence in big riots. The problem I had with it, beyond the fact that the dialogue was insipid, was that they had such a calm and collected walk through the middle of this Battle of the Five Armies melee of flaming Molotov cocktails and things flying around, and yet there they are, Bourne and Julia Stiles, they're kind of talking and whispering and everything's, they're having a little tete-a-tete, and there's like a war going on in the streets around them, which just seemed ridiculous to me. It was just that, again, that sense of, as soon as you put the need to really capture humans and move the story along, it falls apart.
It felt like a video game to that degree, in where you're traveling along through these huge melees like you talk about, and every so often you're going to have an instance where you're going to bump into one of the bad guys or even a good guy, and you're going to have a conversation and everyone's going to hear it until you move on to the next thing. But the scene, the riot, the loud thing that's happening remains the same. It wasn't very real.
There was no way they were going to be able to have that level of intimate conversation and move the story forward. They needed to go into a dark alley, or they needed to sneak inside a building or something, because we could see people throwing things on fire behind them at every angle. And it took me so far out of the movie.
It's Spy 101 to always have a lav mic on your person at all times.
Right.
Yeah.
And another Spy 101 thing is, anytime that you want to meet anyone, make sure that you give them a note to meet you in a very large area where we can create one of these scenes. So that, and no one will follow them, and no one will remember that every time you've done this, you've somehow skirted around the issue. This is so common with spies that where are they going to meet him? Okay, well, I'll get to Paddington Park then. Matt Damon shows up. He's a bit older, but he's still Jason Bourne, still fighting.
It's a testament to how much I like Matt Damon and how much I like the idea of Matt Damon in this character. Although he doesn't talk at all, and it's a dour off, like we've talked about in other films. I still just, even without more character development, and I didn't really care about this next search that he was going on, I still just was rooting for him the whole time and was kind of psyched to see him be Jason Bourne.
Well, the dour off thing is interesting to me. I don't think there was actually one smile at all in this movie.
Oh, you didn't stick around for the blooper? You didn't stick around for the blooper reel?
No. I would challenge you guys to say that there was something that was actually pleasant, a pleasant mood efforted by any of the actors in this film.
No, it does definitely suffer from a lack of any kind of levity. I guess Tommy Lee Jones brings some, maybe accidentally, with some of his weird line readings.
Him in the restaurant with the Facebook guy. I think he was sarcastically happy at some point.
Yeah,
gotcha. Sarcasm.
I'm on Tommy's bandwagon with Matt Damon. Even though the whole time I was rooting for him to just say to somebody, I was happier in Greece, and just take off and just leave the film. But he never did it. That was a disappointment. But I do like Matt Damon so much. And I, just researching the film, I watched every bit of Matt Damon talking about the movie, and then talking about his mom, the teacher, and then talking about his dog. And I just, how his wife and kids roll all over him when he goes home. Like, all these things exist, and I found myself delighting in those as well. So I just find him ridiculously charismatic, and I would watch him in this. I'm glad I saw him in this, even though I'll go watch other Matt Damon things in the future. So.
I felt at a certain point I was waiting for him to just say, "I'm just getting too old for this. I'm done." And just, because he's like, I don't need to be doing this. I think I would have liked that bit of levity for Matt Damon in the role, because I don't recall I don't recall the mood being so serious in all the other ones. I thought there were some lighter moments throughout, and maybe that came through because he had a relationship with another character, and we don't have that interplay. We have, in the prior two films, we've got Joan Allen as Pam Landy, and they've got sort of a little, give and take that they have back and forth. And then we have
Run Lola Run.
Yes. The girl. Yes.
Remember her name.
In the first two. And in this one, he doesn't really have anybody to interact with that he can trust, or that he feels is on his side, really, because Nikki gets taken out of the picture fairly early.
Well, and that was supposed to be Alicia Vikander, right?
What?
Alicia Vikander was supposed to be that person that was going to be his light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. He never took the bait, it seemed like, even for a second.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But yes, I think that was supposed to be the idea.
They were only on screen together for like a minute and a half. And here's the sort of betrayal is that I went in really hoping for a Matt Damon Julia Stiles film. I adore Julia Stiles.
Yes.
I was so mad when she was offed in this film. I wanted to stand up and shout aloud a boisterous yawp.
But she didn't.
Even after that scene, that whole scene was so...
She didn't do particularly well.
No,
even
she
the
didn't,
limited
but
stuff she
I
had.
like her.
I do too. But I liked her in every other movie other than this.
Yes.
I think it's fitting. that in the Bourne books, of which obviously they went completely in different directions from the books, other than the titles. But we had Identity, Supremacy, Ultimatum, and Legacy. The next one in line is actually called Betrayal, which I think ends up being quite fitting with the film.
We've already talked about the asset being that he's an asset in anything that he plays. Do you guys have any comments about Vincent Cassel?
I think it's fitting that they didn't even bother giving him a name.
Do we have a count of all the times he's been an asset of some sort? I started looking at it. I haven't seen all the movies, but I mean, like Ocean's 12, and what was he in Child 44? I mean, we talked about it, but that movie was totally memorable.
Probably some bad Russian.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's kind of a criminal element.
He was the train. That's a deep cut.
Anyway, this is for me. He was just so hand glove in this role that he's, of course, he's the thug.
I thought he was neat though. I like that. I like that he wasn't named. I like that we didn't get. I mean, we got obviously a little bit of not character development, but backstory from him. But I like a guy that is always like, he won't give up the shot. And when they're like, you've got to get out of there, the police are, he's like negative because he wants to go. And he just in a normal voice says, copy that, while like running up 8 flights of stairs. I thought he was kind of neat.
Well, he's good at
I like
doing
that
it.
kind of stuff.
He's good at being that asset. We definitely know that from what he's done. I think what's interesting too about that character though is what's his motivation? Is he have some sort of revenge too? Why does he so badly want to end?
He, which is because I just watched Bourne Ultimatum, but Tommy Lee Jones says that when
Blackbriar.
When Bourne, we released all the Blackbriar files, it exposed a lot of agents. And this one, he was in Syria or whatever, and he got arrested. It took us 2 years to get him out of there. So there's this whole revenge thing. But I just watched Ultimatum a couple days ago, and Pam Landy is the one that takes the Blackbriar files and feeds them into the fax machine and sends them off everywhere. I mean, yes, Bourne stole them out of the safe, but I'm like, Bourne wasn't the one that went public with those. That was someone within the CIA. So I guess I'm getting nitpicky on story details because he probably thinks it's Bourne, or he was told that it was Bourne's fault. That motivation I thought worked really well. To then try to close the circle by making him the guy that killed Bourne's father, I thought was just going way too far with that.
And revenge, again, is that as the central plot of a CIA a spy story seems like a very weak motivation for any of the characters for me.
Yeah, him turning out, can I say one more? Him turning out to be the guy in that incessant parade of that flashback that we saw 19,000 times. And the whole time you're like, it's not the brown person, it's not the other brown person. Just show us who's in the car. And then they finally do, and it's, what's his name?
Vincent Cassel.
Asset.
Oh, Cassel.
Cassel.
Asset.
That felt like when it turns out that in the first Batman movie, it was the Joker that killed, and you're like, oh, what? This is dumb. I completely agree with that. That was just a dumb, final, oh, I get it now, but it's so clunky and doesn't make any sense.
And then he looked at Jason and said, "You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight?"
Yeah. Exactly. You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Exactly.
We talked a lot about how we don't like that whole Facebook deep dream story, but how about Riz Ahmed? Is that how I say his name? The CEO?
I'm assuming so.
Yeah.
The whole storyline was terrible, but I did want to just mention Riz Ahmed because this is kind of a big year for him. He's in this film.
I'm crazy about The Night Of.
I haven't started it yet, but yeah, he's opposite John Turturro in The Night Of right now, and he's going to be in. He's a central character, Bodhi Rook, an ace imperial or an ace rebel pilot. in Rogue One. So he's got three big things. We're going to see more of his face. It was an unfortunately stupid storyline in this film, but you know.
Yeah, and with everything that he's doing, I don't think he's going to be remembered for this movie. I don't think he's going to have to worry about that.
No, yeah, and he is also. I mean, he's more known right now as he's a British rapper, and his stage name is Reez MC. I have not heard.
He is?
Yeah, I haven't.
I didn't know that.
I have not heard anything of his yet, but anyway, that's of note.
If you guys have not started or are thinking about getting into The Night Of, it is wonderful.
It's on the list.
On
it's really
HBO.
Good. It's on HBO, co-written by Richard Price, one of my favorite authors. It's really, really strong.
And what's it about?
A young Muslim kid, who's him, gets involved with a situation and then wakes up not remembering things and is charged with murder. He doesn't think he does it, and we're trying to figure it out. It's probably, knowing Richard Price, it's going to end up being about crime and the failings of the current justice system. Being told very, very honestly.
Or you could just listen to the Serial podcast.
Right,
exactly. We talked a little bit about the politics of this movie and getting it made and whether or not that affected what's going on with it. Do we need to talk about the fact that Matt Damon said that there shouldn't be another movie after Ultimatum, and then now there is this thing that we watched yesterday and today?
Well, as I recall, he said, back... I think when Bourne Legacy was starting to get off the ground, he said he wasn't going to come back for another Bourne movie unless Paul Greengrass was attached.
Right.
So, because he worked with him on these two, on Supremacy and Ultimatum, and then on Green Zone, they worked together. So, I don't know if this was Paul Greengrass getting this project together because, he wrote it, directed it, so it seems to be more of his project than anyone's, and I guess maybe because he was committed to it, Damon came along because he apparently enjoys working with him.
He was on as producer.
Yeah.
We've talked a bit about Paul Greengrass's effect or his touch from the script and also from the direction. If we move on down the line to camera, what do we see there? Is it still Paul Greengrass, or what does Barry Ackroyd bring to this movie?
Back in Ultimatum, I know that there were script issues, and they were kind of, the people had talked about the fact that they were kind of writing it as they went along, trying to figure out where the story was going. I think that, they managed to come up with a story that worked quite well for me, from my perspective. I like that one quite a bit. And Paul Greengrass was able to just kind of direct, and he kind of took the reins and managed it well, and was able to find the path and to keep all the kinetic motion in the story throughout, even though the story was being figured out as they went along. Here, and I don't know if it's because he was also directing it and writing it along with his editor, who was editing it and writing it. I don't know the scope of the story, if they had finished it beforehand or if they were in the same predicament that they were back on Ultimatum. But it really felt like Paul Greengrass still had his hand, like we've already said. I think he had his. He showed his hand well when he was directing all the action sequences, all that stuff. For me, from my perspective, it worked. It was entertaining to watch. It kind of moved me through the film quite well. But it's the rest of the stuff. I had a real sense that it was just really clunky, and I just felt like he didn't know how to direct the stuff well when he was dealing with the other stuff, the actual storytelling that he had to write. And I the camera work in those particular scenes, I mean, it didn't stand out. I don't know. I don't know. I guess it was fine, but I felt like they could have. It really boils down to just a really poor script, I think, overall. I mean, Barry Ackroyd's shot a number of his films, and they all look great. This one, I didn't have problems with the jiggly monkey, all the shaky cam. I thought it worked fine, but I guess nothing really stood out.
That's why I'm starting to come around to thinking that the problem I had with the film, with the look of the film, was not necessarily Barry Ackroyd, but with Rouse and his editing. I mean, it just really felt kind of sloppy, because you look at Aykroyd's work and you look at The Big Short, you look at Captain Phillips, you look at for crying out loud, The Hurt Locker. I mean, all of these films have a degree of that sort of jiggly monkey that works and doesn't just kind of violate your sense of action, but actually puts you intimately into it. And I think that for me was lost in this film, and this film represents a degradation of that over the 5 films in the series. So, I'm feeling like I need to put less of the weight of that onto Aykroyd, who clearly demonstrates he can do it well and shoot competent action, and more to just the way it was all pieced together.
Although interestingly, he didn't shoot the last 2 films. Oliver Wood shot Ultimatum, and I think Supremacy.
He shot all the first 3. Yeah, he shot all the first 3, and it's good that you bring up Captain Phillips, because I think it works really well there in Captain Phillips.
Yeah.
And that is both Greengrass and Aykroyd, but for some reason the translation doesn't work here. So I think putting it at the editor's door might make a lot of sense here. The problem is I think when we start reaching out to the technology and Captain Phillips, the raw nature of what we're looking at there seems to make sense. If we apply that sort of lens to what we're doing here in a Bourne movie, it and this sounds like a pun, but it shakes out in the wrong direction. And I think that's kind of how I felt watching it.
And we we can't forgive the focus issues. They just let so many focus problems through to the final cut of this film that drove me batty.
Is that on purpose?
I noticed a lot of focus issues, not a lot, probably like 5 or 6, especially on, what's his name? Tommy Lee Jones. In his scenes, in like not even action scenes, but like sitting and talking scenes. The only thing that I can possibly, I mean, these are zillion-dollar films, and this has to go through so many people. The only thing that I can think of to make that work is that he changed the composition of the shot in editing. That he only had it in a wide and then instead was like, nope, it's not working. So he had to digitally zoom in and then settle with the buzziness that happens, because that kind of stuff doesn't get through these things.
That's what it felt like to me too, Tommy. I think that's interesting.
It's got to be because he was like, the importance of this shot from this different angle that I'm making up is just my personal opinion, is more important than the fact that some people will notice that this one shot is a little bit out of focus.
But it wasn't just that. I mean, there were a lot of eyeballs that didn't lock on a pulled focus. I mean, just a lot. When you can tell they're trying to lock on an eyeball, and after pulling from a wide, and they didn't quite get there, and it just it bugged me so much.
And as a side note, just to be mitigating Magoo again, this one, unlike the last 2 Bourne movies, not including Legacy, I actually felt there was a better sense of place for a lot of the crazy action sequences. There are times like the magazine fight when he has a which movie was that? When he rolls up and has a magazine, it's an apartment fight.
First one.
Where Bourne is.
Identity.
That's the first one? Oh, that's Doug Liman. Well, in the other 2, there are times when I've been frustrated with Paul Greengrass because it's like, you're doing what I want. You're doing a practical effect, like a practical, really well done, full out action sequence. But then when you cut it to bits with 19 cameras and you cut it so much, usually directors, I feel, do that because they're faking it. Like because they're cutting around the fact that it doesn't really look that good in the medium. But his does. And so sometimes I lose a lot of patience with Paul Greengrass for that kind of stuff. For some reason, this movie worked better for me in a lot of the frenetic action sequences, including the dumbbell fight. Much better. I knew where I was. I knew what was happening. I kind of dug the way that whenever he would throw a punch, the camera would move a teeny bit as if it had been punched. Like it worked for me in a very sort of primal kind of way. I liked it. So that's me.
That Dumbo fight was so terrible.
Well, take out the fact that really, you thought the whole thing, I mean, take out the fact that someone can stand up after being hit with a dumbbell. I think he missed and maybe got it on the collarbone.
Miss. And you know why he
It's
didn't
cool.
miss? Because he got hit. I don't care where you get hit with a 10-pound dumbbell. You get hit anywhere, you're going to break something. And then
You don't remember in
guy
the beginning of the
picked up
film, you see Jason Bourne take dumbbell antidote.
And
Am I the only one that saw that? That's so weird.
And then
Yes.
the guy picks up the dumbbell and throws it at him. So he got hit with a
Yeah.
10-pound dumbbell twice.
Yeah, well,
So
I thought
stupid.
So that okay, fair enough. I guess I just mean the choreography and the way that the camera danced around was actually more satisfying and more comprehensible to me. Obviously, different than you guys than in past Paul Greengrass Bourne movies.
Well, the past
And yes, I'm
ones-
trying to get hired by Paul Greengrass for something. This
me-
one's for you, Paul.
For me, the past ones really had to do with about visibility, and I think we've already talked about it, so I don't want to go too deep into it. But the shaky cam thing before didn't seem to lose the actual visibility of what was happening, where I felt lost a lot in what was going on here. And we talk about somebody had mentioned the car chase, it being a good thing to come back in. I didn't really get a sense of where I was a lot of times in that, and it just wasn't as great a car chase as something that should be equally disorienting in the earlier movies, where it was well lit and well framed in a way that I knew where they were going and what they were doing and why they were chasing each other the way that they were.
Fair enough. Which car chase are you talking about? Are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about
Vegas?
the Vegas one in particular for this movie versus like in the first movie when they're in the tiny car with Run Lola Run all around town,
Which was a
that's kinda
great,
what I was
I mean, that
thinking.
was an epic car chase.
I think it's one of the best. One
Yeah.
of the best in recent memory,
and partly because
And again, different director, though.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys are going back to the first one so much. Do you guys think that Doug Liman did a better job?
I do.
Maybe than Paul
hands
Greengrass?
down,
Oh, really?
hands down, absolutely.
Very
Yes.
interesting. Okay,
Yeah, no,
fair enough.
every time. But I think one of the things that's so great about that early car chase is that just the use of contrast, the fact that he actually demonstrates his skills as a driver in that crappy beat up car against a whole city of police chasing him. And in this film, what is the car he gets into? Essentially a race car, right? He gets into a Charger,
a Mustang,
right?
yeah.
So it was ridiculous. So
well, and you want to talk about physics problems. How many times is that SWAT vehicle going to go through stationary vehicles? That's just not possible that way.
no, it
No.
didn't feel real to
It's
me.
not that kind of car. It's not a tank.
It didn't feel like I go back to great car chases, right? I mean, we did a whole series on great car chases, right? We did Ronin, one of my very favorites. It feels so fast and kinetic. Bourne 1, Identity, feels so fast and kinetic. This one feels so slow. It's like they were just in traffic, and luckily they were able to race a little bit between lights, and then there was the big explosion, and then they put the car into the sign, and it just it did not have that same sense of visceral kinetic passion and power.
What other things should we talk about in terms of the production?
I feel like I'm the loudest right now, and so I get the last word. I don't want that to be the case.
I kind of like the movie. Okay.
There we go. That's better.
So I was talking to a guy I know who happened to be a stunt driver in the car chase in Vegas. And so,
Wow.
That's amazing.
I got some statistics from him because I thought it was kind of fun when we were chatting about this. So in the process of making this, regardless of what you think about how the car chase works, it was supposed to be 5 days filming on the Strip, and it ended up being 19 days. They ended up totaling 14 squad cars. And I think what they would do is they would kind of pull pieces off and kind of keep rebuilding other squad cars to kind of keep them working over the course of those days. They had 5 limos. It was supposed to be 5 limos. It ended up being, it sounded like 10 limos. And what they were doing with the limos is they would actually cannon them into the traffic. So when I think the SWAT runs into a limo and it runs into a bunch of cars. I can't exactly remember where the limo is, but
I remember.
yeah. So they cannoned the limos into traffic.
Because it can't drive, you mean?
No, just so it moved fast enough to total other cars. Nobody was actually in
I
them.
get it.
It was like a cannon. They just blasted it into other vehicles.
Jesus.
They had 3 SWAT vans that they used. They had 3 of the Dodge Chargers that Bourne used. They had what they called the barrier cars. Those were all the ones that just got hit. And they had 70 to 80 other of those cars that they used in the course of all the destruction down the strip. So there you go. That's but it was all real. It was all just genuine car stunt work that they did.
I love that.
For 19
I love
days.
the practicality of it. Yeah. Honestly, that was a pretty brutal.
I had a great time
scene.
with the car chase. I didn't have the issues with it that Pete did, and I mean I've enjoyed. I'm the guy who enjoys Paul Greengrass's films more than Identity. I thought the films got better as we went along, and I enjoyed all the car chase in. I think it was the third one that had the car chase, or it was the second one that had the car chase in the tunnel.
I think that was the second one.
Yeah, but
that's the second one because that's where the third one picks up. Is he's fleeing that? See, Pete, Andy just did a very quiet mic drop right there in response to your loud protestations about the film.
Well, and so to Andy's point, because this goes back to one of the things that's obviously so hard to talk about on so many of these things, because I totally get how much work and destruction goes into this and how much of a devastating economic loss this takes on, casinos like the Aria when they have to be shut down overnight for things like this. I totally get it, and yet it just saddens me when I don't get that sense of where they work so hard and to do so much, and it just does not come across for me. Obviously, I'm the lone voice in this, but it just does not come across with that sense that I know they wanted it to, and that I feel like it should have. Maybe not shooting in heavy traffic in Las Vegas would have been a start.
Well, the heavy traffic thing is an issue, and no, I don't think you're a lone voice, because I definitely agree with you in that respect. I agree it shows commitment and investment, but I'd like value in that too, and the story value for me wasn't there in this particular movie. How about sound, music? Did you guys notice themes? Anything that was working for you there?
It's all the same. I like that they bring back the themes again that John Powell had used before. It all felt very Bourne-esque, although it also, I don't know, it kind of hit a point where it felt like it was in repeat mode with the music. I like how Moby comes back and does remixes of Extreme Ways for every single film. But I also kind of was, it felt that way with John Powell also. It felt like he'd come back and kind of done a remix of his scores, and just kind of, you kind of got like little highlights and a little bit of a mix going on. It didn't feel new, but it still felt comforting.
That's fair. And I think that that's kind of indicative of the film. If you are a lover, you have to be a true lover of the Jason Bourne franchise and the mythology to find joy in this movie. I think. I don't know. Does anyone?
I don't know. I don't know if that's true, because I think true lovers of the franchise may be more offended with the what they did here. I think.
Well, and Andy, you mentioned that they departed from the books here. Is that?
Oh no, not here. They've departed.
Okay.
They've departed from the books
like in the middle of the first movie.
Yeah, it's so far off the rails from the books. I mean, Legacy still is a Jason Bourne story. Let me read you the description of the fifth film, what this could have been. Jason Bourne takes a mission to rescue his only friend in the CIA, Martin Lindros, who disappeared in Africa while tracking shipments of uranium. Once safely back in America, Lindros persuades Bourne to help track the money trail of terrorists buying the nuclear material in Odessa. But once there, Bourne is hampered by confusing flashbacks of unfamiliar places and events, and he wonders if someone is brainwashing him in order to throw him off the trail, or worse, if the man he saved in Africa is really Martin Lindros. Now Bourne must gather evidence while trying to stay one step ahead of the terrorists who won't let anyone stand in their way.
Betrayal.
Huh.
It's like the Manchurian CIA agent.
Well, you're getting back into just your typical spy adventure movies, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think what made the Bourne franchise, make the Bourne sort of trilogy so nice was it was this guy's sort of self-discovery story. And it always came back to him, and it was very character-focused, and now this is trying to take it in that other direction, maybe more in alignment with the books of these very, single story adventure, here's some espionage, here's the big bad, here's the big terrorist plot. But we get that in James Bond. We get that in Jack Reed. We've got that in so many other places. Bourne had a unique place because it had something different. And if it loses that, again, I think it's diluted in a field of better films.
Do you guys remember the single season series John Doe came out right around Bourne Identity, starred Dominic Purcell, pre-Prison Break.
Oh yeah, that's where he's got all the like weird whatever scars or whatever on his body or something
and
like
so
that, right?
He wakes up naked on an island. He has all these fantastical abilities and strange scars and things. And that series also, as it got to the point where he started figuring out who he was, it was canceled.
Yeah.
Like this is a very fragile kind of story, I think, to do right and to do well and to maintain. And I think this film for me is an example of that, and also an example of that in the hands of two guys who maybe should have researched some of their ancillary details before they put them on screen.
Well, do you think it's a franchise ender? I mean, looking at the numbers, my theater was packed. I only had singles when I got there to find a way in. Anyone else?
I saw it Thursday night, and it was, I mean, for an 8:30 showing Thursday night, it was easily half the theater was full. It didn't sell out, but it was still pretty packed.
Pete, you saw it in the morning.
There were 8.
What was it like then? Oof.
And we were all sitting in the same row.
Oh yeah, you're seeing the blue light special.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I think the franchise as a brand is going to bring in a certain amount, and then Matt Damon, is going to bring in a certain amount. And I think in general, it's going to satisfy people. Is it enough to launch, sort of a new wave of Bourne films? I don't know that it's going to do that, because I don't think they have the strength in the story that people are going to be clamoring for what happens next with him, because it's just going to be he's left. The CIA may try to bring him in there, but there's no compelling need there. To me, this was an unnecessary film. It had some high points, it had some disappointments, but overall it wasn't really necessary to the franchise. And I think that's where it's going to leave things. It didn't create enough momentum to have a need for another film after this of, what's going to happen next? I can't wait to see what his next adventure is, or where, the next story takes him, because I think we're all sort of indifferent about where he is, because he's probably going to go back to boxing in the desert, and he'll be fine with that. And I think everyone else would be fine with that too.
Well, the person who won't be fine with that is Universal, because right now, this is on track to, like I was saying, earlier before we started, this is set to be the biggest opening day for the franchise internationally. I mean, they said that opening day, they're estimating the weekend to crack 100 million internationally. So it's on track to do well for the franchise, which might make Universal say, "Hey, let's figure out a way we can get this guy back again."
The roommate. We've got to know about Jason Bourne's roommate. I'm telling you. No, I had ironically, because I like his character and everything so much, especially at one point during the dual strangle off that he was having with Asset in the tunnel, I was like, you know what? Part of me was like, what if he died?
Yeah.
I would have wanted a much smarter movie and a much more of a not thrown in, the father thing. But like if he'd pulled a Han Solo and finally came to an end, because so much of the movie is about he's broken, he's tortured, he can't live life outside of this. He's just so torn apart. If he gets his final revenge, what if he can finally find peace? It was
that would have been the Jason Bourne Julia Stiles movie that I wanted, because it couldn't, the weight of that kind of a change could not have been held by the foundation of this film.
Correct.
But if there's somebody to take over the mantle, I think it would be really great.
Yeah,
but we'd have to see that kind of psychic handoff,
and that would be interesting. We would have had a completely different conversation if that was what had happened there.
Well, so the next one will be the Bourne Synergy, where they bring Aaron Cross and Jason Bourne together for like a little face-off action.
That's interesting.
That's what we need.
I think that would be an interesting direction, is to actually bring the two guys in.
Yes,
that'd be interesting.
After this glowing review that we're all giving you about Jason Bourne, for the folks listening at home, if you don't want to go see it based on all the crazy stuff that we've said here, we're starting a new segment on the Film Board that works with a new appish thing called Flicks Tape. Each of us thugs are going to present a streamable selection of a movie that the current Film Board movie reminded us of or made us wish we were watching, which I think is going to be accurate for our films here, that sort of thing. So let's try it out. Steve, lead off our Jason Bourne Flicks Tape. What would you suggest for people to take a look at?
So, as I was thinking about this, I thought about the direction the Bourne movie was going, with sort of more individualized story, getting away from the character arc. And it reminded me a lot of a TV series, actually, Burn Notice, which has to do with a CIA agent who's been burned. And so we have the balance between him trying to solve the mystery of who sort of burned him, and then he sort of gets pulled into helping ordinary people. And it plays out over several seasons, lots of discovering his past, and it just worked really well. And I thought that's almost the direction the Bourne franchise needs to go. And I thought we don't need that from Bourne because we've already got it in Burn Notice. So it's a series that's available on Netflix, and I think it ended a couple of years ago, so you can binge watch all the seasons.
And Gabrielle Anwar and Bruce Campbell, they're some of the performances of their careers. They're so good in that show.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Andy, how about yours for Flicks Tape?
Well, thinking about spy movies and ones that have great espionage, are written really well, always leave you guessing, I went all the way to John le Carré because, of course, he's come up with some of the greatest spy stories. And Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy was such a great adaptation, I thought, the most recent Gary Oldman version, that was my recommendation. It's a really intriguing story with a lot of double crosses and triple crosses and really interesting cast of people all through the film, and you don't have to worry about any jiggly monkey camera.
And interesting and good story and these are things we didn't hear during tonight's call. What were you going to say, Tommy?
Right. Actually, yeah. Can I ask Andy 2 questions? Number one.
You can ask me one.
Oh, really? If it's just one, it's John le Carré.
I believe that's how you say
I've been pronouncing his name wrong my entire life. And The Spy Came In From the Cold is one of my favorite books. I always thought it was John le Carré. Ugh.
Let me go to howtopronounce.com.
And then number 2, the other question is, I've heard that movie can be a little bit dense to figure out. Is that true? Or this is the one with
Gary Oldman.
Commissioner Gordon?
Correct.
Right. I've heard that it can be a little bit tough to follow. Is that true?
It can be, but if you're paying attention while you watch it, I found it pretty followable. Now, would I be able to repeat back the plot to you? No, because it's one of those ones where I get it, and then instantly it's over. I'm like, wow, that was really interesting. I know what happened, but I couldn't tell you anime because I've already forgotten because it's way too complicated.
Well, that fairly seems a bit opposite from Jason Bourne. Pete, you have a spy movie for us?
Oh, one of my very favorites. Again, when you talk about on-screen charisma, I have to go to Tony Scott's Spy Game. This is starring Robert Redford, Brad Pitt, Catherine McCormick. It's just a great story of CIA recruitment, of assets who are in crazy places, and they try to do all of the great spy stuff that you want spies to do, and they look great doing it, and it's one of those that I could watch anytime, and I think it's all of the things that I want to celebrate when I see a movie like the one we were talking about tonight that didn't stand up. So I think Spy Game is the one to watch. 2001. It's on Netflix. See it before they pull it off for some random reason.
Oh, that's a good reason to get it. Tommy, how about you?
Actually, Spy Game is a fun choice, especially because that's when Tony Scott was just getting into his fetishization of on-screen titles and stuff. And so if you're ever watching a movie and you're like, wait, what time is it there? He'll freeze frame it and tell you.
Clock.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where it's like, bum, bum, it's 9:35, 2 hours to go. And you're like, okay.
That is a great reason to see it by itself. Thank you.
It's a lot of fun. My thing is Old Boy, The original, Spike Lee did an interesting follow-up, but if I assume that if you're a film aficionado or you listen to this podcast, you've already seen the original Old Boy. Just in case you haven't, it's a Japanese film where a man wakes up imprisoned, having been kidnapped and trapped in a bizarre hotel room, and he's kept there for many, many years, and then he is suddenly released without any explanation, and only by trying to rebuild his past is he able to try to find out the answers for why all this happened. It's thrilling, it's scary, it's very exciting, it is very much an action film, and some of the answers he finds is horrifying. It seemed Bourne-esque for that kind of amnesia way.
Oh, so does he get turned into a USB drive at the end? I thought you were talking about Lucy.
He does not, but I do.
And I've seen Old Boy, and I liked it, which is not true about the movie that I picked for our Flicks tape, which is Paycheck, which I've neither seen nor do I know if I like it. But I chose it because it's involved with amnesia, and there's stuff that a guy has to do to piece his life back together, like Jason Bourne. Tommy worked for that company. Am I right?
Yeah. It's based on a Philip K. Dick short story. It didn't work out for us. I was working for John Woo's company at the time. When we started making it, Ben Affleck, who was the lead, was the biggest star in Hollywood. By the time it wrapped, he was so hated because of all the J-Lo controversy and all that stuff that we couldn't even feature his face on the poster. It was just a picture of him running with him faced away from the quote-unquote camera for the thing.
Wow,
So, yeah,
I had no memory of that. That's crazy.
Paycheck. We were on top of the world, and then, yep.
So that's why
Paycheck
this is
did not
good.
work out that well.
Because what you said about Old Boy is that if you're a film aficionado or you listen to this podcast, you've probably seen it. So regardless of whether you're a film aficionado or you listen to this podcast, you probably haven't seen Paycheck. So I'm still happy about the fact that I'm putting it on our Flicks tape. So it's,
I'm gonna come clean. That's Paycheck is actually a guilty pleasure of mine.
I love it.
It's got some really,
great.
It's got some really great sequences in it.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
That's awesome. So we have these 5 movies. We're going to put them on a Flicks tape, and we're going to include them with the show notes so that people can reference these movies if they have been turned off so completely by our Jason Bourne comments throughout the show. And with that, unless anyone has anything else to say about this movie, I think we should take Jason Bourne and rank it.
First name Jason, last name Bourne. After Legacy, Jeremy Renner was shorn, and now Damon. The one-time Martian is back. Green grass at the helm, so keep your Dramamine stacked. And when I say tread, you say stone. Rogue agent coming in, now his cover is blown. Hit you with the chair leg just for a start. Time to rank up David Webb on the Bourne flick chart. I miss you, Pam Landy. I'm out.
That's the business right there. That's the business.
I would throw my mic on the ground, but it's very expensive.
All right, start us off, Andy.
All right, here we go.
We're
Jason Bourne or The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. I am going to watch The Hobbit over the Jason Bourne.
Hobbit.
Jason Bourne.
Steve and Pete.
Well, I was waiting as like a gentleman does for Steve, but I'm
still thinking because I didn't walk out of the theater angry about Jason Bourne, but I don't know that I have a strong desire to see it, and I feel the same way about The Hobbit. I enjoyed it, but it's not like on my I have to watch it again list. But
I'm definitely The Hobbit.
I'm going to say Jason Bourne. I'm going to say Bourne.
Yeah.
You're going to say Hobbit. I say Bourne. You say Hobbit.
All right, next up, Jason Bourne or Everest.
Everest.
I will say Everest.
Oh no!
Gosh.
No. Oh no!
I have to abstain.
Oh no!
Oh, you do?
I didn't see Everest. I wasn't on that one.
I'm going to say Everest.
Okay.
All right, moving along. Jason Bourne or The Monuments Men. I will say Jason Bourne here.
Jason Bourne.
The Monuments Men. Weird movie.
I enjoyed that movie, and I will fight for it.
Great. Why don't you marry it?
Men.
All right, I'm Jason Bourne.
I,
Is that a tie?
I'm
No,
Jason
that's
Bourne. JJ, what were you?
Bourne.
All right, Bourne takes it. Jason Bourne or Child 44. I am Jason Bourne.
On our list. I am Jason Bourne as well.
Oh, or Child 44?
I have to abstain because I didn't.
I'm
see
definitely Child 44.
A train undresses a boy. It's cool. Spoiler alert. I'm Jason Bourne.
Okay. Jason Bourne. I was waiting for you to say that, Tommy. Jason Bourne or
I have to.
Jason Bourne or the Wolverine?
Wolverine.
The Wolverine.
Wolverine.
Jason Bourne. I know I'm throwing that into the fire, but Jason Bourne.
That's okay. Sometimes you do that.
Thank you.
That leaves us at number 39. 39 out of 48.
Okay.
Oof.
God, not far enough.
That's so surprising and disappointing for a movie involving Paul Greengrass and Matt Damon.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's mostly disappointing that we didn't get to rank it against Black Hat.
Black Hat.
We didn't even talk about. We didn't talk about the technology and at enough detail to show just how stupid it was. And I think we skipped Alicia Vikander. Did we not talk about her?
We talked about her very slightly.
She was terrible.
What should we say about her?
Yeah, Andy said it. It's unfortunate. She's. I think
role
she's
was terrible,
very
too.
talented.
I think she was intriguing but underused.
Well, okay. Since we're talking about her, allow me to unhinge. The biggest problem was that I just don't think they knew what to do with her and completely just bastardized her character in the third act when she could have been such a wonderful liaison for Jason and then made her the betrayer and the unreliable liaison at the very end of the film. And I think that that sucked all of the life out of what she could have done. She was really poorly written, and she was the foil for most of the ridiculous technology.
She was very good at the beeps and boops.
At the beeps and boops. Yeah. She was the master of the beeps and boops. Yeah, no, I think potentially a different person could have shown the turncoat nature of the role better, but that could be the problem with the character too. It's difficult to tell where the error is there, but the character ended up being very thin and unintelligible because of something buried within what was going on with her role. Anything else about Alicia? You know that she's Swedish. I didn't know that she was Swedish. And I totally untraceable accent for me. How about a letterboxd rating? Anyone?
1.5.
I'm a 1.5 as well.
Half.
Wow. I would give this 2.5.
What's it out of?
Out of 5.
7.
It's out of 7? No, it's out of 5. I'll give it a 3.
So that's an average of 1.8.
Oof.
That rounds to a 2.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
That, I think, is probably the lowest rating that we've had since I've joined the film board, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you weren't here for the Hobbits. Right.
Oh, that's right. That's before my time. Yeah. Yeah, the Battle of the Five Armies would have definitely brought it down there for me. But let's go somewhere new. Where do we go from here? Next month we're staying with the idea of war, right? A little bit lighter, though, perhaps? War Dogs?
It better be lighter.
Is that the Hangover director? I forget his name. I apologize. Paul Phillips? Something like that?
Todd Phillips.
Todd Phillips. Thank you.
Yep. Next week, we are going to be having a speakeasy with cinematographer Sam Levy, talking about John Huston's great 72 film, Fat City.
He's a good guy, Sam Levy.
Great show.
That was a fantastic conversation.
Yes, it was. And then we're continuing our disease film series with Serenity, which is, I think Pete and I agree that it's a little bit on the, skirting the fit with the genre, but it works.
Oh, well, no, it does
work.
fit. It does fit.
Oh, Serenity, the Firefly
Yeah.
movie about
Yes.
the jerks. What are the jerks called in that movie?
The jerks.
You're talking about the Reavers?
the Reavers.
The Reavers, yeah.
Those cannibals,
I
they're
love that
such
movie.
jerks.
They are such jerks. Well, this is you have to
They're
know, and I know
scamps.
and JJ and I had coffee. He said he's a little bit behind on the show right now, and so you don't know if you're behind, you haven't been listening, just how ridiculous some of the films that we've been talking about are. Some of these disease movies that we haven't seen, and so
great.
Serenity marks a major upgrade. And I think, speaking for Andy, we're both very much looking for this as a bit of sweet relief.
Well,
Bells to the yeah.
actually, any excuse to see Serenity is probably a good one. If you can fit it into any of the themes that we're doing, I think would be a good thing. So there also will be a whole bunch of other things happening with TNR Shorts that you'll see popping up from time to time in the near future. So check those out as well. We've got a bunch of those in the hopper coming. This particular conversation has been a firing squad, I think, for Jason Bourne. Thanks for coming out tonight, Tommy.
Thanks. I appreciate it, guys. Always a pleasure.
Andy.
Thank you very much.
And Pete.
Thank you, JJ. I'm subdued. My opinion is resolved.
I'm glad. Steve?
I'm going to go abduct Pete and put him in a secret Black Ops program so that he'll forget this movie.
I think he'll welcome that.
I think it'll be good for all of us. Good night, everyone. Till next.